Hey, what's up guys, it's Oakley, and we'll be playing Rome 2. I am, of course, fielding the Macedonians here, after having released the Moments episode on the 9 lives of Alexander the Great. I have to say that is one of my favorite episodes to not only research, but also produce. The artwork that Robbie McSweeney put together was absolutely fantastic, above and beyond anything I could have asked for. Absolutely freaking fantastic. As for the research itself, I was paging through Arrian's recollections of the campaigns of Alexander, and it was freaking great. Awesome stuff, and just digging around to find all the various times that Alexander skated past death was incredible. I kept finding more and more. At first I was like, okay, let's use the title, The 9 Lives of Alexander the Great, alluding to the fact that cats are supposed to have 9 lives, and I was crossing my fingers that I would find 9 different occurrences, and I was amazed when I found 9. I even found more than that. Believe it or not, there are more times where Alexander would have died. If you start to tack on all the times he was leading assaults, or either in a siege or an open land battle, yeah, that starts to add up pretty quickly. A couple other instances as well where he may have fallen sick or gotten injured on the job, so to speak. One in particular comes to mind when he was out in Baktria helping to siege a city. He was charging up a hill, and an arrow comes and hits him right in the shin. I don't remember if it bruised him or shattered his shin, but did some crazy damage to him. He was down and out for the count for a little bit, and then he was kind of still leaning on his foot, and slowly kind of trying to recover, but still carrying out sieges. And in this other battle, he moved up to a settlement, and a defender, this big hulking defender, tosses down a massive stone, and it hits Alexander square in the face, smashing his face. The king is knocked out unconscious on the ground. Again, another one of these occurrences, kind of like at Gaza, where he takes a hit and just goes out and the defenders cheer. But no, Alexander gets right back up the next day, and I can't remember if they finish off the city the next day, but he's up and running. So this dude is unkillable, freaking insane. So that being said, if you haven't watched that Moments episode, definitely go ahead and check that out. Like I said, it's one of my favorite episodes that we've been able to produce. And again, a big thank you to those of you who have contributed on Patreon. It's your support that has made it possible for me to hire fantastic artists like Robbie McSweeney to do their amazing stuff. In any case, back to the battle at hand. I've just been moving up with my Macedonian forces, and we're going to be fighting against a Baktrian army here, so that's a little bit fitting. These are going to be Eastern campaigns. And actually, Alexander's campaigns divide kind of neatly 5 years and 5 years, where the first half of his campaigns are spent kind of in the traditional sphere of the Persian Empire that you would think up until Mesopotamia. And then the second half is all spent on the extremes in Baktria and Sogdiana, kind of modern day Iran, Afghanistan, Tajikistan, eastern portions where they're like backwaters. No one really knows too much about those areas, but Alexander spent years campaigning, establishing settlements, all kinds of stuff. So we can imagine that this battle would have been part of that. Although historically you would have seen the opposition very much holed up in mountain valley passes, in little settlements, doing ambushing and raiding, and not so much of this open field land mass formations. But in any case, back to the kind of deployment at hand. So I have decided to split up my forces to be more nimble. And this is historically something Alexander was forced to do when, as I said, the second half of his campaign ended up being a bit more focused around guerrilla warfare. He would use a lot of deployments with little forces working together. He'd grab a couple units of shield bearers, a couple units of Thracians, some archers, some peltas, some slingers, some supporting cavalry, little functional groups, and send them off with little tasks. It's kind of like how the Roman army evolved from being kind of this big hulking triplex Achaeus to trying to be a bit more functional, and that's how they introduced the cohorts, which are larger self-sustaining groups that can be sent out and actually handle themselves on the battlefield in kind of dynamic ways. Anyways, I'm going to be using this dynamic approach to the forces here to start to engage my enemy, and I'm going to be doing so with kind of mixed forces with my little functional groups here, as I like to call them. So the slinger, very, very cheap troop that I would just pull over here to be able to harass and force the enemy to do what I want them to do, always being careful that there may be some sort of reaction. So I'm keeping an eye on these mercenary Syrian archers, and the second they start to pivot towards me, I'm just going to pull around the flank, slowly work my way this way. And the nice thing here is this is a pretty cool combo. I have one hoplite, in case my enemy charges at me with cavalry and I need something to handle it. So I could handle cavalry with cavalry, but that's a trade where it goes pretty evenly. But with the backup of infantry, what I can do is put these guys in shield wall brace, pull my cavalry behind. My opponent either charges straight into this or goes around the flank. If he goes around the flank, then I can just keep my cavalry hidden behind this, all the while get the slingers to fire into it. So it's always important, I've found, on the flank to keep hoplites with you, or some sort of infantry to help turn cavalry engagements in your favor, and even try and, you need a rock of some variety. And this is something historically that I always questioned, like why, oh why, did people never supplement their flanks with infantry bodies? I presume it's because it was a bit of a mess to handle, but a lot of times battles would be turned when cavalry got the best of a flank, and I never understood why they didn't just stick 1 or 2 infantry units into the mix there to help out hold the cavalry flank. You did see that occasionally, so the Macedonians and Alexander did train or bring on some infantry specifically equipped to run alongside cavalry and fight with them. And actually the Gauls did that. They had these cavalry runners, and they would actually work in teams where the cavalry would run forward, and then you'd have these quick runners, usually more youthful forces, who would run alongside the cavalry and fight with them. And I believe they were supposed to have grabbed the mane of the horse and kind of like tagged on for the ride in close support. So that's kind of cool, and that's what I'm doing on this flank. Anyways, in the center, what I've done is I've also done a little bit of a feign with my mercenary Thracian archers, and their whole role here is just to harass. I did want to start to get some shots at these Syrian archers, so my cavalry were there to chase them off and allow my 2 mercenary Cretan archers to trade more favorably against these Syrians who have been forced to kind of turn about, and they're going to go back and fire at me here soon. Meanwhile, I'm also, as my opponent is forced to micro, I'm going to take the opportunity to slowly sneak up with my guys, and my slingers here are going to start to fire away. They're actually going to start to hit the rear of this Baktrian Royal Cav as my opponent was repositioning, and I think he's too busy micro on this flank. So his response to me has been to move these mercenary Syrian archers. I'm going to start to trade. My slingers here are dirt cheap, so he's going to end up winning that battle, but I'm getting a fair amount of kills actually. Slingers are armor piercing, so they're going to trade pretty effectively. Meanwhile, you do have an infantry force that's getting a bit too far away, and again, I'm not taking an engagement unnecessarily. Basically, I'm getting all I want to get done here. I'm firing away at his archers, I'm keeping him busy. Oh, and in the center, don't want to miss this, I do get a nice strike with my mercenary Thracians. Although there are thorax swordsmen in the back who are going to counteract with a volley of javelins, but I get on out of here after shattering his force. Meanwhile, the cavalry does wake up to what's been going on, pull out after 4 losses, and he's going to swap out for the Syrian archers. But anyways, like I said, on this front, no need to engage. If his infantry is coming after you, don't feel like you ever have to take an engagement if you don't need to. Always trade more cost effectively. So here, I'm going to let them sit out of position, and then I'm going to feign a charge on his mercenary Syrians, get a couple javelins off, trigger the pursuit of these thorax swordsmen, and now I pivot around with my 2 archers, and I'm going to continue to take apart this Syrian archer force. My only objective on this flank is to take out his archers. Put him at my mercy. My objective is not to take out his infantry just yet. That will be the next play. Anyways, these light cavalry are going to charge in. They're going to bait out a volley of javelins, so that is awesome. Every volley there would otherwise kill about 10 infantry in the final engagement, and wasting one of those is very, very good. Meanwhile, my slingers here are continuing to trade decently. Almost no armor on these guys fighting against very armored Syrians. But like I said, I've been giving them as much. Oh my god, and they did actually shatter that Syrian before they routed. So yeah, there you go. Really happy with how those guys are performing. And now is the point where I want it to be. So I can strike with impunity at his forces. I'm going to try and move up with my mercenary Cretan archers and try and fire straight into these thorax pikemen. Don't have the best of melee stats, or sorry, melee defense stats. Anyways, my cavalry tried to strike again at these mercenary Syrian archers, but there was enough reinforcements from the thorax contingents that wasn't able to do too much damage. So now I'm left to trade with a slinger force against a Syrian archer force that's been double chevroned. But again, like I said, this is a fairly good trade. The slingers like that do have some pretty good armor piercing, so it's better than firing with cheap archers into this force. So I'm pretty happy with how this is going. And by forcing them out once again with these mercenary Thracian cavalry, I'm able to get more fire. And I think I may just get into this engagement here. I think I'm going to decide to commit to try and take out these forces. More javelins are going to be unleashed, and man, do those destroy my guys. It's a little bit scary there. But again, every baited shot that I get is really useful. I did also sneak through with these mercenary Thracian cavalry, and these guys are awesome. I always recommend bringing them if you can afford to. Very light, they can, you know, play with these heavy cavalry, all the while throwing javelins back at them. They're really good, like I've been showing you, to bait out volleys, to help your ranged units trade more cost effectively. And if you can get them into the rear lines, oh my god, you can cause so much of a headache and a micro in your opponent's side. So he's going to dedicate 2 cataphracts to chase after me. Gonna be very tired after that pursuit. Anyways, over here, back to the engagement. So I was talking about having a rock to hold. That is going to be my hoplite force. It's going to be holding, and actually maybe not a rock. An anvil is the best analogy here. So it's an anvil with which to crash in with your cavalry. So I'm going to get a double sandwich on his guys, pummeling a lot of his forces on the ground here. So I'm trading pretty well, but these are pretty stocky infantry, and they should be able to do good damage against my cavalry. So I disengage. You can see I already took 3 losses. So again, the philosophy of not engaging too long. I have reinforcements on the way. Mercenary Thracian Peltas. These guys have really good armor piercing, and against clusters like this, it's going to be ideal. So I'm going to unload into these guys and just trade really evenly. These hoplites are going to hold a little bit longer. They are going to start to lose out relatively quickly, so I have to come in with reinforcements. I know the cataphracts are back on their way, so I'm going to come in with a flanking force of pikemen. They're going to try and sequester off this force. Meanwhile, the enemy is going to try and countercharge. Ooh, they get 1 volley, but charging unbraced like that is going to be pretty punishing. So that 55 men left. Once they start to get back up and my cavalry can clean them, we're doing a lot of damage. And here comes another cavalry strike at the rear. Really good on that. And then I'm going to try and tell my mercenary Thracians to stop firing, because they could do some friendly fire. I'm going to try and pull them against this target. Hellenic cataphracts are going to try and react to get around my pikemen. They just barely get on out of there, but they're getting nailed by my peltas, and it looks like they got clipped on a different unit, did not get their charge bonus, so I can come in with my cavalry. I'm going to go ahead and reprioritize my targets to be attacking this cataphract force. It looks like it was given an attack order, and it's going to get stuck right into my pikes. We're moving forward here. So my opponent being caught at a bit of a microlapse. He should try and disengage here soon, but my peltas are going to force his hand in terms of a poor decision here and really get a lot of damage done. So these are extremely expensive forces that I'm decimating. And on this front here, continuing to clean up these Hellenic cataphracts very cost effectively. Yeah, finally the cataphracts are going to try and pull out of there, but as they do, Peltas is going to shatter them. I believe they're going to be broken here. Oh no, still alive, taking a half damage and still up and running. But they have taken a real beating, and now the march continues. This whole flank is secured. Destroying these Hellenic cataphracts are going to be coming back in on the center. And now I can start to move up with the rest of my forces. These mercenary Cretan archers have exhausted all of their ammo. They did effectively kill half of this pikeman force, a couple other units as well, so really starting to hurt this front rank. But now these thorax swordsmen are going to pivot around, and I'm trying to expose the rear of his pike line so I can come and crash into it. On this flank, Alexander has surveyed the forces on the left. Presumably, Parmenion is doing his good work there. And Alexander characteristically is going to try and pull the right flank, drag the enemy out of position, and get ready to lead the assault himself. My own guys here with 19 kills are now going to be put on double speed, and we're going to go around that flank. Here comes the charge up the center. I'm going to posture here with my shield bearers and other units and try and hit the back. Over in the center, thorax swordsmen are going to get crashed into. 1-2 punch with the companion cavalry followed up by these Thracians. Thracians are out of ammo at this point, but they can go ahead and just charge in and hit these guys now that they've been forced to be on the ground. And I did sacrifice 1 archer unit to be in the back here. Ooh, but as light... Oh, no, sorry, that was the slinger force. Yeah, it's very light, cheap troops. They're going to shatter almost immediately. Not having done too much, they did somewhat distract them. But it did put this infantry unit in a poor position. I also pulled through with my companion cavalry. My intention was to spread them out in a thin line and really hit the entirety of this group to force them to break position and then come in with a charge with the shield bearers. However, he does just barely clip me, so this is actually going to be one of my first flaws here. I was hoping to break this, but the enemy catches up to me, and now I'm coming in for an assault on a pike line. I figured, hey, they're only 3 men thin. Hoplites and shield bearers are pretty strong. I figure I can wear this out. But the timing here is not excellent. I really needed to just sit in front of him. Again, the philosophy here is not to take an engagement if you don't need to. There is nothing here to punish me just sitting in position. There is no need for me to charge into this pike wall. I'm winning the engagement in the back. I should have just stayed here and forced my opponent to charge into me. But kind of like an idiot, I'm going to charge straight into this. My opponent has done an interesting build where he has thorax, hoplites, kind of standing in front of the pikes to shield them, making it even harder for me to poke through. But anyways, that engagement is going to happen, and my opponent is going to wheel in with the thorax sword and try to seal up the back and allow his front line to do as much damage as possible. We'll see how this goes. Meanwhile, the crush is continuing over here. These thorax swordmen putting up a good fight, and in the center, I did commit my second companion cavalry force with already 130 kills to try and clean up these Hellenic cataphracts, but more thorax swordsmen are coming in. This is where Alexander and the remainder of the cavalry is going to try and help out. And yeah, these pikes are doing a number on my hoplites. Really hard for me to push through. Heavy numbers, but it's not doing the job. Over here, I try and charge into the rear of this pike force, but these guys are going to cock their javelins, fire into me. A lot of them do miss, and I didn't do as much damage to that pikeman unit as I thought I would. And then this infantry force gets into me, so I guess it was mercenary Thracian cav, light units. That's why I didn't do as much. But here comes two cavalry forces bashing into the rear of this blob. I really need to shatter this. This is a very big impediment to me. If I can knock this out, then I can come crashing into the fixed line of these pikemen. I'm getting a little bit of an advantage here. This is the pikeman force that I had fired at with archers, and now my own Cretan archers are going to be swarming into the rear, kind of like English longbowmen against knights here. Not very good in amongst themselves, but against, you know, knight footmen that are otherwise engaged, they can really clean up hitting in the rear. So that's interesting. So they're going to be sprinting in, tackling the back of this pike line and trying to help my hoplites push forward. Now we finally push through to the pikemen themselves, so doing pretty well here. In the center, the combat is still underway. I pulled out with my light cavalry. Now the engagement is underway. They still have a couple javelins, so they're going to be throwing them into here, but now we're getting a bit of a sandwich on all sides. I have pulled in with some of my own pikemen. Going to deploy these pikes and then give move orders to try and, you know, lawnmower the forces here. But it is a very, very close fought battle in the center. Light cav going to charge into the back of these thorax swordsmen who are doing excellent against my cavalry, bringing down my companions to pretty low numbers. But here comes the push of the pikes, and pikes do end up being a bit finicky in the Total War games. They'll stop often like this, where, you know, they're not really fighting anyone, so you really got to keep giving them movement orders. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm double right-clicking to give them movement orders through the force. Going to allow them to proceed a little bit further, tell them to stop, and then now they're going to drop their pikes. And once they do that, you can see now the pikes are actually contacting and striking a lot more of these forces. So the battle here is going pretty well, although in the rear where my swordsmen are fighting, I'm taking a lot of damage, so I'm going to pull out with my companions before I lose them completely. And I'm going to allow, again, my opponent to fight straight into my own pike forces. In the center here, I haven't been super lucky. My opponent just absolutely destroyed these shield bearers. Supposed to be very elite infantry, but the pikeman unit here only taking 2 losses, killing 150 men. That just goes to show how strong pike units are from the front and how poor of a decision that was for me to strike the center. On the flank where it was weakened, I am getting a bit more luck, but in the center, without that rear cavalry charge, just didn't have it in me to break it. Speaking of rear cavalry charges, oh shit, I didn't realize that. I thought my opponent was facing my hoplites. Charge in with cavalry and ended up taking a pretty big hit. So yeah, they're going to be dropping. Over here, though, I did get a nice charge into his units that were currently tied up with the enemy. Oh, and this is interesting. Didn't realize that the Baktrian Royal Cav have these like palm leaves behind them. Don't quite know what the history is behind that. Perhaps, I assume, on some wall relief or sculpture that was there, and CA decided to kind of take that relief and run with it. Not quite sure of the historicity of putting palm leaves behind you. But yeah, that's kind of interesting. But anyways, getting a nice hammer and anvil here, and then the enemy collapses with that. So that was a pretty fun battle. My opponent wasn't super proactive. He kind of turtled up and allowed me to eat him piecemeal. But nonetheless, I think it was fun. Had a good go at it, and I think we got to talk a bit about tactics, taking the right engagements, slowly piecing, taking your enemy apart piecemeal, and then we also talked a bit about history, which is kind of the recipe for how we like these Total War battles to go. Anyways, definitely go ahead and check out that Moments episode on the 9 Lives of Alexander the Great. As I said, it is one of my favorite Moments episodes that we've put together. I think you will really appreciate it. And then if you could also go ahead and check out the Patreon page, throw your support so we can hire more artists and really pay these guys, it would be phenomenal. Anyways, to the end results here. My guy's trading pretty well across the board. Lots of kills on these station peltas, archers, and slingers. Hoplites doing pretty good. Cavalry doing fairly well. And on my opponent's side, really not trading well with his heavy cav, not trading well with the Syrians. The main killing blow for his force was these thorax pikemen. In the center, I gave him free kills. I think to make this battle as close to perfect as it could have been, I really should have held back from attacking that. If you knock out these thorax swordsmen, give them 25, 50 kills apiece, kind of like how these thorax swordsmen performed, then I would have mopped the floor much more easily. Would not have been a Pyrrhic victory, probably would have been a normal one. Yeah, that's it. Hope you guys enjoyed. Stay tuned for more, and see you in the next one. Peace out.